Welcome. Today I'm going to talk about AstroToaster. I'll cover what it is, what it does for astrophotography or near real-time observing, and also take you through a workflow which demonstrates all the different sliders. And from that you'll understand the abilities and how easy it is to acquire very decent astrophotography. At the end of the video there will be a link to a PDF file which contains the software you need to download, the order you need to download it, and the settings to set it up to allow it to grab images. It's not totally camera dependent. I currently use a ZWO Astro camera, planetary camera. I use a Melon Cam. I use a Canon EOS, Nikon, and so as long as all of the above devices, as long as your camera has some bit of software with it or some process that it can lodge the images, the photos it's grabbing in a folder that you specify on your PC, then AstroToaster will be able to read it in a variety of formats such as RAW, FITS, TIFF, JPEG, PNG, variety of formats. It can read and then process it. So without further ado, this is a screenshot of AstroToaster in action, and over here I just happen to be using a Canon, so it's got EOS utilities, controlling the camera and lodging the shots in a folder of my choice. These three screens here are AstroToaster, and I've told it to go and look in that folder for incoming JPEG or RAW or TIFF or whatever files, and then you colorize it very quickly and there's the image. Now most of the time for outreach take very short JPEG files, very short duration, high ISO like ISO 6400, and maybe 8-second shots, and that means in about 20 seconds the shot has been taken and it's appeared in AstroToaster and it's been coloured, and the audience will go, wow, look at that. And you then talk about the legends surrounding it. We live in Australia, there are Aboriginal legends about the sky, and if it involves that constellation where the object is, it's very entertaining and interesting for the audience. Not that I claim to be an expert on all that stuff. And obviously you can mix in the modern day scientific facts about how far away it is and so on and so forth. It's not true astrophotography. The guys who do that, I'm in awe of their patience. They, if you Google astrophotography, you'll learn all about maybe taking it with a monochrome camera and taking lots of darks and flats and bias frames, and sitting there for hours taking 5-minute shots and 10 of them, and then take another hour's worth of darks, and then sitting around just talking to your mates, not actually looking through the scope, and then taking all those images home and the next day processing them in a variety of software, and being pretty well skilled in Photoshop and some other interesting imaging software, and eventually you come up with glorious photographs. And I'm in awe of the detail and images that they can capture. I'm more into real-time observing, and as I said before, my shots are very short and quick duration. And I'll post up a link to a live capture of M42. But without further ado, I will crank up AstroToaster and give you the tour. Now for this demo, I'm not going to actually use a image acquisition program which I normally run over here, such as EOS utilities or the Nikon equivalent or the Sony equivalent, or things like Fire Capture or EOS Movie Record, which can also record it, or SharpCap or Melon Cam Sky, which run all various cameras that I've got and allow me to lodge the output frames in a particular folder. So I'm not going to do that, I'm just going to load up some demo shots to give you a tour. the first thing it always asks you is continue last session, and it shows you the last image in your last session, whether it was yesterday, last week, or whenever it last was used. So it sort of says, do you want to continue on with this? And it's like a replay option. If I said yes, it'll load all of the images into here, and you can go right through and play with them and readjust the colors and really muck around with it to learn the process of taking the shots and really tidying them up quickly, which you can do. As I said before, I'm near real-time observing, otherwise known as EAA, Electronic Assisted Astronomy, and I take shots, and within a minute I'm looking at a very decent shot. So normally at night though, you say, no, don't continue the last session, I'm starting with brand new stuff. And that's why over here on the left you'll see no files. If I'd have said yes, you would have seen all the files from the last session, yesterday or last week. But it does retain that last image that you shot in this. It's somewhere in its memory, and I've got no idea where. The first time I crank it up, this is the workflow. I always go into settings and I just check whether the format of what I'm looking for is correct. So if my camera is producing RAW, I would change that to RAW. If it's producing FITs, I would change that to FITs. If it's JPEGs, JPEGs, and so forth. The ones I'm looking at today happen to be TIFFs. Next, I just check this monitor folder here is the folder where my camera is lodging its photos. Okay, and the rest here I'm not going to talk about because they're contained in that link at the end to the PDF, which describes what software to download, when to the order to download it, and the settings and so forth. So there'll be a link right at the end that'll take you through all of those. But that's what I always check when I start out. And the next thing you do is actually tell it to start monitoring. Very easy to understand, left to right basically. Click monitor. It's now monitoring that folder for any new files coming in. Do I want to stack them or do I want a single? Well, the first time you slew to a target, you kind of don't know you're definitely on the target, so it's a pointless exercise to start stacking straight away. You should always take a single, and you click this, as it says with the auto hover, to auto refresh the picture. So as soon as the image gets lodged, refresh this picture down here. Okay, and you take a single so that you can frame the shot, center the object right in the middle of the frame and get a good decent shot. To fudge taking an actual shot, I'm going to use this picture file button, where again you can do replays by just selecting on any picture and muck around with it and change the sliders and the coloration and all that kind of stuff. So that was Alberio that I was looking at there before. I'll choose a nebula, so I'll just click this one, and you can see it's processing up here, and very shortly that will change the picture. I'm running on a MacBook Pro 2008, so it's a bit of a slow machine, but there's the image, and I'll just turn on the coloration. Now here's the viewer button. There's a button called full, which I'll explain in a second, and then you've got this color adjustment. There's your color adjustments. Okay, you can move this around, resize it, and all those usual things. But the important thing on this first initial single shot is it's highly unlikely it's going to come in like that. Usually your target's a little bit off, and if you change to negative and you change it to logarithmic, which makes this image on the left go even more obviously a smudge, like that, you can often pick up, say up the top here, you'd pick up the faint trails of the galaxy arm or a nebula, and you realize you're not quite centered. So you simply move the mount using the hand control buttons and take another quick shot, very high gain or very high ISO, in order to grab as much of it as you can to center and see it and center it. And when you're sure it's centered, you just turn these off And the next thing you do is you always keep looking on these sliders down here. Expand, lens gradient and sky gradient. And these do an initial stretch. If you don't know what that is, Google it, astrophotography, what is a stretch, and it'll tell you. I always move these sliders very small amounts at a time. All of these are very sensitive sliders. What does an expand stretch do? It does the following. I'll just move it maybe 3 or 4, 6 across. And for each of these buttons you have to click this apply gradient. So any of these 3 buttons here, which are gradients, you click it, watch the image on the left. Okay. Lens gradient means that there'll be a dark area on the outside and not a lot brighter in the middle. You simply move that slider a little bit, click apply gradient, and try and make it as least obvious gradient as you can, if you want to. I don't usually bother with it. Sky gradient means you might have the horizon here, it's very bright and it gets darker and darker. Because of the camera orientation in the scope, it might be the fact that the horizon's actually there and it gets darker over this way. So with sky gradient, as well as applying an amount of gradient, you've got an angle to adjust it as well, because it could come in at any angle, and you just muck around with that if you want the perfect shot. But for me, I really don't muck around with it. I just go straight into expand gradient, and then I start playing with this up here, the black point and the white point. And again, if you don't know what they are, go and Google astrophotography histogram, where it'll talk about the red channel, the green channel and the blue channel. I hardly ever adjust those. The black point I adjust, and it's simply moving to the right raises the black darkness in the background when you release the slider like that. And the white point simply makes all the white stuff get brighter as you move to the left, like this. And as soon as I release my finger off it, you might have seen it get a bit brighter. Contrast, everybody knows what that does because you've adjusted the TV or your monitor. Same with brightness. Saturation is the intensity of the colours, and tint is the hue of whether it's more green or more red. Okay. Best advice, very simple, just go out there and start taking some images. Do single shots to start with. Do the expand gradient, don't worry about the others, making sure you press this apply gradient button, and then just start mucking around with all of these sliders. And the next day you can muck around with those pictures a bit more using that facility I told you about before of clicking on picture files and go and find them and have another go at them. Okay, so let's suppose you're doing outreach, or you yourself are out there at night and you're looking at this image. Again, you've got viewer, full color adjustment, but we haven't explained what full does. Well, watch this. I kind of like this feature. Okay, and I'll just click color adjustments to get rid of it. You can see what it does. It's fantastic for outreach, and quite frankly fantastic when you're out there at night, because your image acquisition program in the background could be doing a thing called stacking, which I'm going to talk about next. And again, if you don't know what that is, Google astrophotography, what is stacking, and this image will be just changing in front of your eyes. And if you think it needs a tweak in color, just click that, adjust it. Okay, it's a very neat way of looking at the object. Alright, out of full mode. What else can I show you now? Right, we've covered these buttons on the left, we've covered most of these. Yeah, we're pretty well there, except for stacking. Okay, if you're going to stack, that is, you've got a really nice image, but it's got a little bit of noise. As you saw, that one that we just looked at before had a bit of noise. You can see this black background's not black in places, and certainly here it's not detailed, it's got a bit of sort of crystalline effect. Well, you can stack. and if you look that up and understand what it is, this is how you operate it in AstroToaster. You simply come over here and you click stop because you're currently processing single, so you stop it. You come over here to this button, which we haven't yet explained, set current picture as the start of a new stack, and whatever the last picture in this list was that it got to, it'll make that the first image in the stack, which you've colorized and got looking really nice like that, and the mount hasn't moved, so you're about to start stacking. So all you do is you set your camera capture software up to take a series of shots at a certain interval, and in order to get them you just come back here and click monitor, but this time we're going to do a stack, and you click stack, and it shortly will start immediately processing that. You see how it's like a temporary file which it uses, okay, and obviously you click refresh and it will start refreshing this viewer in the background. But the important thing to note is when it's stacking, you've got a few options over here on the right hand side. If it's stacking too slowly, you can change the picture scale, which means this particular shot was at 1920 by 1280, and you can reduce that by 75, so it's got less pixels to work with and it's faster, okay, or 60 or whatever. Some camera acquisition software just keeps going forever and doesn't have a limit, and you can set, well, I want 10 frames or 15 or whatever here, so the camera in the background might keep going, but you can actually stop. Great for Alt-Az, this next one, the best percent for stacking, good for Alt-Az and good for mounts that don't track well, because you can say to it, I want to select 70%, say, and it means that out of a stack of 10, it looks at every single shot it's stacking and works out if it's better than the previous one and so forth. So at the end of 10, you will definitely end up with 7 frames, the best 7 frames used in the stack. And remember that this is all live on the fly on as images come in. You can set all these color adjustments before any image comes in if you have a standard setting, and as soon as the images come in, it starts to colorize them and treat them that way. So yeah, and you can save it at any time during that process. So while it's stacking, you can, and even though it's adding some and getting rid of some frames if they've got problems, you can do it very quickly. I always leave the star detection threshold as auto. It's so it can stack and derotate. You can set how many you want if you really want to. The dark frame factor we'll talk about in a minute. Auto detect stack means that you can actually be lazy and just leave it in the stack setting permanently, and you can slew off to another target, and while the slew's going on, the camera might capture a blurred image. It looks at every pixel and goes, oh, this is a blurred image, it's different to this one, so it'll start stacking that blurred image shot. By the time your scope settles down and starts to acquire a new steady image, it captures the next frame, and this AstroToaster says, hang on, that's different to that blurred image, I'll start another stack, and so on and so forth. But it does take a bit of CPU to do that, and I tend not to use it. You can add images to the saved text to the saved image, or add, sorry, the other way around, add text to the saved image as you're saving. If you've got a plane flying through on one of the images, you can later on stop the processing, click on the file and click refresh to check which image has got the plane. Then you can do something like this. You click on the image, right click and come down and say remove, and then you come over here and recalibrate the current stack, and I'll just recalibrate minus the shot of the aeroplane going through the image. I've never used restack all because it's going to take every single shot and stack them, and given that you've got different targets, well, I don't use it. But that's that. The next quick discussion will be on if you really want to go nuts and start taking these darks, which is where we talk about dark frame factor. Again, if you don't know what a dark frame is, Google it. Two ways of doing it. One is you can cap your scope, keep AstroToaster running, etc. Cap your scope, and start taking your darks. But before you do, click stop, because you don't want to process them, because they're going to come in as lights. So you let the shots come in, even though the scope is capped, right? It will still come in as a light. So you click on each of them, right click, and you see at the top here, you can say it's a dark, a flat, obviously a light, a reference light, an offset frame, and a variety of things, right? So you turn them into darks, and when you start process by monitor and stack again, it will process those marked as darks and turn it into a master dark. Okay, and it will you can also create those darks using your acquisition program in another folder and drag and drop them in which case the master dark will be created in that folder that you saved your darks. And that's kind of what I've done, because here in this shortcut up the top here, this button called calibration files, you simply navigate to the folder, and the first time you navigate it stores that away, and yeah, you've got all these darks here listed. And you know, if I just change to a list, I've got this master darks for all these different ISOs. Could be gains. If you're dealing with a camera that's gain, it'll write gain and put a number there, and obviously the seconds of exposure. You can select as many of these as you like. Okay, arrange, open them. You say it's dark frames or flats or offsets, and it literally puts all of them in. And what AstroToaster then does is, when you're taking your shots, as they come in, it looks up the image information and automatically works out which of these is best applies. So if I was running a Canon or a camera or a Nikon, it says, oh, ISO 800 for 180 seconds. That's a very long exposure for me. I just went nuts one afternoon and saved as many as I could on a rainy day. But yeah, if I was taking them at around 180 seconds or even 150, it'd look at these two files and work out which is the best one to apply. And if I was using a ZWO camera with gain rather than ISO, I would obviously bring in those calibration files, and it would automatically pick the one closest to the gain and exposure time. So it's very clever. And that's AstroToaster. So summarizing very quickly, when you very first come in, I'm just going to shut the viewer down. Okay, when you very first come in, you do get the viewer, and I'm just going to drag it across here. Okay. When you very first come in, you get something like that saying, do you want to continue the last session? In an evening's viewing, you say no, and this over here is blank, and you just say monitor single. You take a single image, you use the color adjustment tool, negative, logarithmic, to center the object, find the object, and once you have, usually you just go and click expand and slowly increment it up and down and click expand gradient until you're happy with that roughly, and you tidy it up with black point, white point, maybe a bit of contrast, a bit of brightness, a bit of saturation. It's up to you how much you want to tweak it, and you either live with that single shot and go nuts with it. Don't forget you've got that wonderful full viewer format. And yeah, if you do want to stack, stop, set new stack, and then go back here and click monitor, stack, and refresh, and away it'll go. And that's AstroToaster. Thank you very much for watching. Use the link to find the PDF file for what to download, in what order, and how to make those settings. Thank you very much.